So now to the heart of the matter, what is patient-focused drug development? Redefining unmet need. Again, in the past, we defined unmet need by bringing together multiple KOLs. I think probably market research did some of that. I think some of the physicians designing trials did some of that. But at the beginning of my career, we never thought to sit down with patients and caregivers and say, so what's really the problem? You know, what really matters to you? And that's where things are shifting. We're looking at both of those things. So we're not leaving one important group, the patient, out. So it's still important to have our key opinion leaders, our KOLs, and the science that goes with that, but it's also important to understand what is a concern to the patient. So the FDA has definitely been part of this. I think it's really exciting to say that I've seen innovations coming from the agency in as much as coming from what we're trying to do on the industry side and collaborations between those, like I mentioned, with Critical Path. You love that. You know, people also think that, oh, the agency isn't changing. The agency is changing too. So they are very focused on getting the patient's perspective. They really have put forth that patients understand what they need more than anyone else in a clinical context. And they really are soliciting input from the patients on the severity of their condition, what are the daily life impacts that really need to be addressed if we're bringing good solutions forward clinically. So that's cool. Here's the list the FDA put out of their target indications that they are going to have in many cases already and are continuing to sit down and meet with the patients and the caregivers and find out more so that when they meet with the pharma companies, they can say, oh, well, can you look at this too? And so that is a really cool thing that's changed. Especially in rare disease, you know, you're starting down that path with less known and trying to really understand the disease or condition, conceptualizing treatments, and moving those through so you have very specific outcome measures. And indeed, you know, some of these may be new biomarkers that need to be qualified. So there are new biomarker qualification guidances available, and that's what we're following, and that's what we're beating the new drum to. And so that can be, in many ways, it can be any kind of data. It can be, you know, the imaging data, it can be the metabolomic data, it can be a combination of clinical and imaging data that creates new algorithms so that we can enrich trials. There's a lot of stuff in this space that if you're curious enough, you know, I certainly would love to talk more about it. So we're really working hard in collaborative forums to design new endpoints to meet those unmet needs, to really revamp how we do trials, adapt to trials, and so on, and using biomarkers in that context so that we can do more. And I think that's the thing. Starting to work in rare disease, I realized we have a lot of valuable data that has been donated by the patients in our clinical trials, and we need to be looking at it not just from our primary objectives, but really looking at it in terms of what more we can deliver. So this is what the new pharma looks like, and I mentioned at my table earlier, I believe that this area in Wisconsin is poised to really springboard the new pharma because we have health IT experience here, we have great device experience here, and we have some emerging pharma companies, and when you put those together and you start thinking the new pharma is a disease management company, not just delivering a particular safe and efficacious med and having a certain therapeutic bent. This is what it looks like. So while you're developing the drug itself, you're also looking at biomarker identification, how you move that through the parallel process to get approval, because most of these end up being devices. So you need to have expertise of both drug development and device development and launch with a more disease management-focused solution. So this is definitely where we're involved. Data sharing. I love this. Everybody's talking about big data. Everywhere you go, everywhere you look, it's all about big data. So I thought this would add some levity. Humongous data, maybe even better. Should we go for humongous data? Or should we be cautious? And so you can guess I'm probably going to say there's great advantages, but we should also still be cautious. I think there's a lot of benefit. I did a presentation at an FDA conference in April talking about data sharing, trying to create ways where we can collaborate and share data between organizations, particularly in rare disease. There's a lot of great reasons to share data. Sometimes it's because we can do a better job at designing our trials. we can define our entry criteria more explicitly and be more successful with enrollment, not amending our protocol 10 times and having it reapproved all over the world 10 times by ethics committees. But we can also bring those data together to answer some of those key questions that have yet been unanswered, and get that information to our advocacy organizations and our patients so that they're armed and empowered in new ways to manage their conditions. And the overall point I think that I took away when I first started looking at rare is, we almost have an ethical obligation to use that data to its maximum because, essentially it's going to advance science in clinically relevant ways. But it's complicated. We have privacy and security issues. We already have trust issues, obviously, and consent issues. And I think when I said humongous data, I'm actually joking because I think we have to be very careful when you pull data together from many sources and you've got this big data opportunity. We have to be really careful not to analyze the data and create misinterpretation or misleading secondary analysis. And I love this quote from Joe Blitzen at Harvard. He says, just because you have massive amounts of data does not mean you have massive amounts of information. So I think that's a great caution to consider when everybody's running around fanning big data at you. And then the other thing that's really cool, I don't know if you guys remember Seinfeld, and this Julia Louis-Dreyfus character was after her data. She wanted to look at her chart, and it wasn't possible. And in the last several years, another big change that really feeds into what can we do with big data is the fact that patients own their data. You own your data, and it's really important that you understand what's happening with your data. And if someone throws a HIPAA form in front of you and says, hey, it's just for insurance, be really careful because everybody is after your data. Your data is moving through a system that you're not aware of. And in many cases, it's a misperception that your data are de-identified completely because there are also ways where it can be re-identified. So you need to know that. You need to be, I think it's really great to donate your data. I think it's really important to the health of future of some of the science that we're doing. But I also want every patient to be well informed if someone is going to use their data and really consent to the use of that data. So I think it's a cool movement. It was a movement that came about from a woman named Regina Holiday. She did my jacket. She's an artist. Her husband died, and she was trying to advocate for him and couldn't get his records and couldn't get the physicians to understand some of his history because she didn't really have it. And so she was really the Rosa Parks of you own your data and a really great person to know. So she does these jackets, which are people's health stories, to help raise the voice of patients in context of what they need. And I think it's pretty cool work that she does. So yeah, you own your data. You have a right to a copy of it. It can't cost you much. It can't take a long time. And you can actually make corrections. So it's a super cool thing. But more importantly, remember, you should designate what happens with your data. And we've seen that ethical trade-off when the scientific community is enthused about something in the pursuit of common good, but forgets that one little thing. So we want to make sure we're measured in the way that we approach this. And so now I'll put everything I've said in the context of where we are today outside of the pharma industry. Healthcare costs are rising. People are aging. And we're all talking about patient-centered care. I think we have to be really cautious, too, to understand technology for the sake of technology doesn't mean that we're delivering better care or better solutions. So we have to be really willing to check ourselves. And while we're enthusiastic about technology, say, is it helping? Is it getting us somewhere? So that's a caution. So there you go. Here are my summary points. The challenges that are faced by pharma are pushing forward innovation and changing the roadmap of our pipeline targets. We are seeing more indications for rare disease, products licensed at later stages. Companies are also seeking to find ways to better serve future patients through collaboration, patient input, and technology. Companies are defining and redefining how we look at unmet need. We're really looking at serving a broader picture of unmet need. And there is a continued critical need to reduce the costs of drug development.